The ice did not crack all at once. It whispered first. Deep beneath the frozen ocean of Narith 9, where entire cities clung to the underside of a kilometer-thick shell, the warning began as a vibration too soft for alarms to recognize. It passed through steel supports, through nursery walls painted in bright, artificial suns, through the bones of every parent who had learned to measure safety in silence. By the time the sensors caught up, it was already too late to pretend this was a tremor. Something was drilling through the sky. Elora Voss stood at the central observation ring, watching the surface feed fracture into spiraling fractures of white and black. Above them, the Helix Dominion had arrived without declaration, without negotiation, without even the pretense of conquest. Their machines did not form battle lines. They descended in perfect geometric patterns, drilling through ice, rewriting atmosphere, harvesting signals like predators testing the pulse of prey. They had not come to occupy Narith 9. They had come for what lived beneath it. Impact breach in 11 minutes. The system announced, calm and indifferent. Structural integrity at 63% and falling. Elora did not move. Around her, thousands of children were being guided deeper into the thermal shelters, their confusion rising into fear as the lights dimmed to conserve power. The Council had already answered. Not with fleets, not with reinforcements, with silence wrapped in policy. Intervention would escalate. Engagement would provoke retaliation. Sacrifice would preserve the greater peace. She had heard every version of the same sentence until it lost meaning. Now the ice above her city was breaking, and the galaxy had decided that Narith 9 was an acceptable cost. "Open the restricted channel," she said. A pause followed, not from the system but from the officers around her. Everyone in that room knew what she meant. The file existed, buried beneath layers of advisory warnings and historical disclaimers. A species marked unpredictable, isolated, effective, dangerous. "Director," one of them whispered, "there are no treaties, no guarantees. If they respond. If they don't," Elora replied quietly, "there will be no one left to regret the decision." The channel opened. The transmission took 3 seconds to cross the void. The reply came in less than one. No greeting, no protocol, no hesitation. Just 6 words that cut through the collapsing silence of the colony like something alive. "Do not let them take the children." Elora felt the room shift before anyone spoke. Not hope, not yet. Something sharper. Something that did not belong to fear. "Confirm incoming fleet signature," she ordered. "There is no fleet," the sensor officer said after a moment, confusion creeping into his voice. "Only a single vessel entering system." Above them, the ice screamed. Elora closed her eyes for half a second, then opened them again as the surface feed adjusted, locking onto the approaching object. It was smaller than expected, slower than expected. Its signal profile flickered like something unfinished, almost fragile against the vast mechanical swarm tearing through the upper atmosphere. "That's it," someone whispered. "That's all they sent?" Elora did not answer, because the drilling stopped. Not gradually, not strategically, instantly, as if the Helix Dominion, an empire that had never paused for anything, had just noticed something it did not understand. And for the first time since the attack began, the enemy hesitated. The silence above Narith 9 did not feel like mercy. It felt like calculation. For 11 relentless minutes, the Helix Dominion had carved through the upper ice with flawless precision, their machines moving in patterns too exact to be random, too adaptive to be predictable. Entire sectors of the frozen shell had been reduced to controlled fractures, each break feeding data back into a system that learned as it consumed. The colony had watched that advance with the numb certainty of prey measuring the distance between itself and the inevitable. Then the drilling stopped. No warning, no signal shift, no visible command. The machines simply paused. Across every sensor band, the helix formations adjusted, not retreating, not advancing, but reorienting as one. Thousands of autonomous constructs shifted their vectors toward a single point in orbit, their attention drawn not to the colony beneath them, but to the lone object entering the system. The human vessel. "It's not engaging," the sensor officer murmured, confusion threading through his voice. No weapon signatures. No defensive deployment. It's just holding position. Elora leaned closer to the projection, her eyes tracking the faint outline of the ship against the storm-lit void. It was smaller than she expected, certainly nothing that resembled the warships described in scattered coalition rumors. Its hull design lacked the aggressive symmetry most military vessels favored. Instead, it appeared modular, layered, almost improvised in places, as if different eras of engineering had been assembled into a single frame. "It's not a warship," one of the defense analysts said, relief and dread colliding in his tone. "It can't be." "Then why did they stop?" Elora asked quietly. No one answered. The answer, when it came, did not arrive through weapons fire or tactical maneuver. It arrived as sound. At first, it slipped through the noise of the colony's systems unnoticed, a faint signal threading its way into communication channels that had long since been overwhelmed by emergency traffic. Then it grew not louder but clearer, resolving into a pattern that defied translation algorithms. A melody, soft, steady, unfamiliar. "What is that?" someone whispered. The audio specialist scrambled, isolating the signal, attempting to decode its structure, its purpose. Carried no command protocols, no encryption layers, no tactical markers. It did not attempt to override systems or infiltrate networks. It simply existed, repeating with quiet persistence, spreading across every frequency the Helix Dominion had saturated. Elora felt something shift in the room again, but this time it was not fear. It was confusion. "Is this communication?" the sensor officer asked. "It's not directed at us," another replied. "There's no linguistic anchor, no data payload. It's not trying to say anything." "Then what is it doing?" No one could answer that either. Above them, the Helix machines reacted. Not with aggression, not immediately, but with something far more unsettling. Their formations. Destabilized, subtle at first, then increasingly apparent as drones adjusted their positions in ways that broke from their established efficiency patterns. Sensor readings flickered as if struggling to maintain lock, targeting arrays recalibrating again and again as though the human vessel's presence was interfering with more than just visual tracking. "It's disrupting their coordination," Elora realized, her voice low. "How?" someone demanded. "That's not possible. Their network is adaptive," she finished, "which means it still has to interpret what it encounters." The melody continued. It did not change. It did not escalate. It simply persisted, threading itself into the Helix Dominion's awareness like a question they could not categorize. For the first time since their arrival, the machines hesitated not because they were forced to, but because they did not understand. And the Helix Dominion did not tolerate uncertainty. "New activity," the sensor officer said sharply. "Dominion units are redirecting. They're abandoning the drill vectors." Elora's breath caught. "They're targeting the human vessel." Relief flickered through the room, brief and fragile. If the Helix shifted focus, even temporarily, it would buy the colony time. Minutes, perhaps more. Enough to reinforce the inner shelters, to move more children deeper into the thermal zones, to prepare for the worst with something resembling a plan. But the relief did not last. Because the human ship did not move. It did not evade. It did not deploy countermeasures. It did not accelerate or retreat. It remained exactly where it was, its signal steady, its strange, quiet melody continuing without interruption as the Helix Dominion reoriented its full attention toward it. "Why isn't it responding?" the defense analyst demanded, panic edging into his voice now. "They're about to be overrun." Elora did not answer. She was watching something else. "Magnify the lower orbit band," she said. The display shifted, zooming past the primary swarm, past the massive drilling constructs and the dense clusters of attack drones, down toward the fractured ice where the first breaches had begun to form. For a moment, nothing appeared different. Then the data resolved. Small objects, barely distinguishable against the chaotic sensor noise, were descending toward the surface. "Those aren't debris signatures," Elora said, her voice tightening. "Track them." The system complied, isolating the incoming vectors. Dozens of them. No, hundreds. They moved with controlled descent patterns, adjusting their trajectories to avoid unstable fracture zones, threading through the collapsing ice with deliberate precision. "They're not targeting the Dominion," the sensor officer said, disbelief creeping into every word. "They're heading for the shelters." A ripple of unease spread through the command ring. "That doesn't make sense," someone said. "Why would they?" Elora understood before the sentence finished. "They're not here to fight," she said. The words felt wrong even as she spoke them. "They're here to extract." Silence followed, heavy and disbelieving. "Extract?" the analyst repeated. "From inside a collapse zone? With no secured perimeter? That's suicide." Elora's gaze remained fixed on the descending objects as they pierced the upper ice layers, vanishing from orbital sensors one by one. Not if that was the mission from the beginning. Above them, the Helix Dominion advanced. The pause had ended. Their machines surged forward with renewed purpose, abandoning the confusion induced by the human signal and shifting into direct assault patterns. Energy readings spiked as weapons systems activated, targeting the stationary vessel that had dared to interrupt their harvest. The first wave of Helix fire converged on the human ship in a storm of coherent energy that should have reduced it to nothing. The colony held its breath. The impact came, and then nothing happened. No explosion, no debris, no shield flare. The energy simply vanished. "Impossible," the sensor officer whispered. The readings confirmed it. Every attack dissipated at a fixed distance from the vessel's hull, not deflected, not absorbed, but erased from measurable space as though redirected into a dimension the colony's instruments could not perceive. "They're not using conventional shields," Elora said, her voice steady despite the chaos building around her. "They're folding the attack out of phase." "How is that even?" "It doesn't matter how," she cut in. "It matters that they expected this." Below the surface, the first of the descending human pods reached the outer shelter zones. Internal cameras flickered to life, capturing the moment the objects breached the reinforced access points. They did not explode. They did not deploy heavy weaponry. Instead, their outer shells split open with controlled precision, revealing figures moving with practiced efficiency into the dim, overcrowded corridors. Humans, not in massive armored divisions. Not in overwhelming numbers. Small teams, moving fast, moving with purpose. "They're prioritizing the children," Elora realized, watching as the first group reached a nursery sector and began organizing evacuation lines with calm, decisive gestures that cut through the rising panic. "They're not trying to win the battle," she said softly. "They're trying to save what they can before it starts." Above, the Helix Dominion intensified its assault, their focus narrowing, their aggression sharpening as the human vessel continued to defy their understanding. The melody still played, unchanged, unbroken, and for the first time since the attack began, Elora felt something dangerous begin to take shape beneath the fear. Not hope, something far more volatile. Because the humans had not come with a fleet. They had come with a plan. And whatever that plan was, they had already started it before anyone else realized there was still time left to act. The Helix Dominion did not make the same mistake twice. Whatever uncertainty the human signal had introduced was burned away in seconds, replaced by something far colder and far more dangerous. Adaptation. The machines recalibrated, their formations tightening into aggressive convergence patterns as thousands of units shifted from distributed assault to focused annihilation. The lone human vessel had revealed itself as an anomaly. Now it would be removed. Energy spike across all Dominion arrays, the sensor officer reported, his voice tightening as the readings climbed beyond previous thresholds. "They're not probing anymore. This is full output engagement." Elora did not look away from the display. Above the fractured ice, the Helix swarm compressed into a single, suffocating mass, their weapons aligning with mathematical precision. It was not chaotic. It was efficient, the kind of efficiency that erased civilizations. "They're escalating faster than before," one of the analysts said. "They've identified the human vessel as the primary threat." "No," Elora replied quietly. They've identified it as the unknown. The distinction mattered, because the Helix Dominion did not fear strength. Strength could be measured, predicted, countered. But uncertainty forced them to accelerate beyond caution, to destroy before understanding could become vulnerability. The next volley came without warning. It was not a barrage. It was a singular event, a convergence of energy so dense that it warped the sensor field around it, collapsing data into a blinding spike that drowned out every other reading. The kind of strike designed not to damage but to erase. It struck the human vessel directly. For a fraction of a second, the projection showed nothing but light. Then the light collapsed, and the ship was still there. Not untouched, not unchanged, revealed. "What is that?" the sensor officer whispered. The outer layer of the vessel had peeled away under the impact, sections of its modular hull separating with mechanical precision, drifting outward in controlled dispersal. What had once appeared to be an uneven, almost fragile structure now exposed something beneath it that no one in the command ring had expected. Symmetry, purpose, power. "That wasn't damage," Elora said, her voice low, steady despite the shock tightening her chest. "That was concealment." The fragments of the outer hull did not drift aimlessly. They repositioned, locking into formation around the core structure like pieces of a puzzle rearranging themselves into a new configuration. Panels rotated. Internal frameworks extended. The ship expanded, not in size, but in presence, its silhouette shifting from something uncertain into something unmistakable. A warship. No, something worse. Signature reclassification complete. The system announced, its tone unchanged despite the impossibility of what it was reporting. Vessel designation unknown. Internal structure exceeds previous mass estimates by 300%. "They hid it," one of the analysts breathed. "They hid the entire thing inside a decoy frame." Elora's mind raced, assembling the pieces faster now, the pattern snapping into place with a clarity that felt almost violent. "They didn't hide it," she said. "They disguised its purpose." Below the surface, the situation was deteriorating. The Helix Dominion had adapted to the human insertion. Hunter drones, sleek and merciless, had redirected from orbital assault to subterranean pursuit, slipping through the fractures in the ice and descending into the colony's inner layers. They moved without hesitation, their targeting protocols shifting from mass harvest to surgical elimination. "Contact in Sector 12. A ground feed crackled through the command ring. "We have Helix units inside the shelter corridors." "Repeat." "They've breached." The transmission cut off in a burst of static. Elora clenched her jaw, forcing her attention between the orbital battle and the unfolding chaos below. The humans had moved fast, but not fast enough to avoid detection. Now they were outnumbered, outgunned, and deep inside a collapsing environment with no clear extraction route. "And yet, they're holding," the sensor officer said, disbelief creeping into his tone as new data streamed in. "Small arms fire is effective. Their weapons are low yield, but the Helix units are failing to adapt." "How?" someone demanded. "Their systems learn in real time." "Not fast enough," Elora realized. "Not against variables they don't recognize." On the ground feeds, human teams moved through the corridors with a precision that felt almost unnatural. They did not fight like conventional soldiers. They did not engage in prolonged exchanges or attempt to overpower the Helix units directly. They disrupted, redirected, and dismantled, using the environment itself as a weapon. Thermal vents became traps. Structural supports became choke points. Narrow corridors turned into kill zones where the Helix's superior numbers became a liability instead of an advantage. "They're fighting like this was planned," Elora said, her voice tightening. "Like they've done this before." Above, the transformed human vessel responded. The melody stopped. The silence that followed was not empty. It was charged. Then the ship moved. Not with the gradual acceleration of conventional propulsion, but with a sudden, disorienting shift that tore at the sensor readings themselves. One moment it occupied a fixed position in orbit. The next, it existed somewhere else, its trajectory rewriting itself faster than the system could track. Microjump capability, the sensor officer said, his voice rising. They're repositioning inside the engagement zone. The Helix Dominion reacted instantly, their formations fracturing as they attempted to compensate for the unpredictable movement. But the human ship did not follow a pattern. It did not adhere to any model the Helix could anticipate. It moved like something that did not care about the rules. The first counterattack came without warning. From the exposed core of the vessel, a single line of energy extended, not outward, but forward, collapsing space along its path into a narrow, concentrated distortion that cut through the nearest helix construct without resistance. The machine did not explode. It ceased. One moment it existed, a perfectly engineered instrument of destruction. The next, it was gone, its mass reduced to nothing the sensors could measure. Target lost, the system reported, as if the phrase could contain what had just happened. The Helix Dominion hesitated again. Not because they were confused, because they were recalculating. They're identifying the weapon, Elora said, watching the swarm adjust, their movements tightening into new formations designed to isolate the human vessel, to contain it, to overwhelm it through sheer density of force. They won't make the same mistake again. Then neither will the humans, the analyst replied. Below, the pressure was building. The human teams had reached the inner shelters, evacuating children in controlled waves toward newly established extraction points. But the Helix drones were closing in, their numbers increasing with every passing second as more units diverted from orbit to reinforce the subterranean assault. We're running out of time, one of the ground coordinators said, his voice strained. Evacuation corridors are collapsing. We can't maintain this pace. Elora felt the weight of it settle into her chest, the fragile thread of possibility tightening toward breaking. The humans had bought them time, but time alone would not be enough. Not against an enemy that did not tire, did not hesitate, did not feel the cost of what it was doing. Above, the Helix Dominion made their decision. Their formations collapsed inward, abandoning distributed assault entirely as they converged on the human vessel in a single, overwhelming mass. It was a risk. It exposed them. But it also concentrated their firepower into something that even an unknown defense might not withstand. They're committing everything, the sensor officer said. If that ship falls. It won't, Elora said, though she did not know if it was certainty or defiance that drove the words. On the display, the human vessel did not retreat. It did not evade. It waited. And then, as the Helix swarm closed in, something inside the ship changed. Power surge detected, the system announced. Energy levels exceeding previous thresholds. The core of the vessel began to glow, not with the unstable flicker of overloading systems, but with a controlled, rising intensity that suggested something far more deliberate. What are they doing? The analyst whispered. Elora did not answer, because she saw it. Not on the display. Not in the data. In the pattern. They're not trying to survive this, she said, her voice barely audible. They're finishing it. The Helix Dominion surged forward, their weapons charging, their formations locking into a final assault vector that would bring every remaining unit into direct engagement range. The human vessel held its position. The glow intensified, and deep beneath the surface, as the last evacuation team struggled to reach the extraction points, a new transmission cut through the chaos, sharp and unmistakable. Ground teams, this is Arcbreaker Command, a human voice said, calm and unyielding. Final phase initiated. You have 3 minutes. 3 minutes. Elora's breath caught. For what? Someone demanded. No answer came. Only the rising light above, and the growing certainty that whatever the humans were about to do, it would change everything. 3 minutes is not enough time to save a world. Elora Voss knew that with a clarity so sharp it felt like truth carved into bone. It was not enough time to stabilize a collapsing ice shell, not enough to evacuate a population scattered across fractured corridors, not enough to fight an enemy that had already consumed civilizations far stronger than Narith 9. 3 minutes was not a victory window. It was a boundary. A line drawn by someone who understood exactly how much could be saved, and how much would have to be left behind. "Confirm evacuation status," Elora ordered, forcing her voice into something steady while the command ring pulsed with overlapping reports. 72% of primary shelters cleared, the coordinator replied. Secondary zones are still in progress. Structural failure accelerating across sectors 9 through 14. Helix units? Closing from all vectors. They've stopped adapting. They're committing to direct termination. Of course they were. The Helix Dominion had recognized the pattern. Whatever the humans were doing, whatever weapon they were preparing, it required time. And the machines, for all their complexity, understood one simple equation above all others. Remove the variable before it completes. On the surface, the swarm collapsed inward. What had once been a vast, distributed network of machines now compressed into a singular, suffocating mass around the human vessel. Every unit, every construct, every fragment of the Helix Dominion's presence in the system converged toward one point with absolute purpose. The arc breaker. It no longer resembled anything that could be mistaken for a rescue vessel. The last of its outer layers had reconfigured into a lattice of rotating segments that encircled the core like a skeletal crown, each piece humming with restrained energy. The exposed structure beneath pulsed with a controlled intensity that warped the sensor field around it, bending light and data into something that felt less like technology and more like a refusal to obey the rules of physics. Energy containment at 94%, the system reported. Stability holding. How? One of the analysts whispered. That output should be tearing the ship apart. It would, Elora said quietly, if it wasn't designed for this. Below, the final evacuation lines were forming. Human teams moved through the corridors with a speed that bordered on reckless, guiding the last groups of children toward the extraction points carved into the deeper ice layers. There was no hesitation in their movements, no wasted motion. Every action was precise, deliberate, as if each second had already been accounted for before they ever set foot on Narration 9. They're leaving themselves last, the coordinator said, his voice tight. They're holding the outer corridors to keep the Helix units contained. Elora watched the ground feeds, her chest tightening as the reality settled in. They're not planning to extract everyone. The silence that followed was heavy, but not surprised. No one in that room was naive enough to believe otherwise. Above, the Helix Dominion struck. The final assault was not a volley. It was annihilation made deliberate. Every weapon, every unit, every fragment of their overwhelming force unleashed in a single coordinated convergence that turned the space around the arcbreaker into a storm of energy dense enough to fracture sensor arrays. The light swallowed the ship. For a moment, it seemed as if the Helix had succeeded. The readings collapsed into noise, the projection dissolving into a blinding field that erased all distinction between target and attacker. Then the noise resolved, and the arcbreaker was still there, not resisting, not defending, holding. Containment at 99%, the system announced. Threshold approaching. Elora's breath caught. They're not absorbing it, she realized, her voice barely more than a whisper. They're storing it. The implication hit the room like a physical force. They're letting the Helix power their weapon, the analyst said, disbelief giving way to something closer to awe. They're turning the entire swarm into fuel. Below, the last of the children reached the extraction points. Small transport modules, deployed from the arcbreaker before the final phase began, waited within reinforced caverns carved into the ice. Their engines hummed with restrained power, ready to launch the moment the signal was given. Evacuation at 89%, the coordinator reported. We need more time. You don't have it, Elora said quietly. She did not look away from the display, because above them the arcbreaker reached its limit. Containment at 100%, the system announced. Release imminent. The Helix Dominion did not stop. They could not. Their entire force was committed, their attack locked into a feedback loop they did not understand, their energy pouring into a system that had already decided how it would end. For the first time since their arrival, the machines had no path to adapt. The arcbreaker moved, not through space, through it. The core of the vessel collapsed inward, folding in on itself with a precision that defied comprehension. The lattice surrounding it shifted, locking into a configuration that focused every fragment of stored energy into a single, impossible point. And then, it released. There was no beam, no explosion, no visible weapon. Space itself reacted. The region around the arcbreaker twisted, compressed, and then inverted, a controlled collapse that propagated outward in a perfect sphere. The energy unleashed was not directed at the Helix Dominion. It redefined the space they occupied. Every machine, every construct, every fragment of the swarm was caught within the expanding field, their existence rewritten at a level the colony's sensors could not fully process. They did not burn. They did not shatter. They ceased. The wave expanded, consuming the entire Helix formation in seconds, erasing the overwhelming force that had descended on Narith 9 with surgical finality. Then it stopped, perfectly contained, perfectly controlled. The space around the colony fell silent. Above, where the Helix Dominion had once dominated the sky, there was nothing left but empty orbit and the distant glow of the Arcbreaker's dimming core. For a long moment, no one in the command ring spoke. They simply watched, waiting for something else to happen, for the enemy to return, for the impossible to reverse itself. Nothing did. Helix signatures, gone, the sensor officer said finally, his voice unsteady. All of them. There's nothing left. Below, the extraction modules launched. One by one, they tore free from the ice, carrying the surviving children of Narith 9 into orbit, their trajectories aligning with the Arcbreaker's position as the last human teams disengaged from the collapsing corridors. Final evacuation at 93%, the coordinator reported. Remaining teams are. The transmission cut off. Elora closed her eyes for a fraction of a second, the weight of that number settling into something she would carry for the rest of her life. Not everyone, but enough. Above, the Arcbreaker stabilized, its structure retracting, the immense power it had unleashed leaving behind a vessel that looked, once again, smaller than it had any right to be. A channel opened. Director Voss, the human voice said, calm despite everything that had just occurred. This is Captain Mira Hale. Immediate threat neutralized. Extraction corridors are secure. Elora forced herself to respond, her voice steady despite the storm of emotion beneath it. You destroyed them, she said. An entire Dominion force. Pause followed. Correction, Hale replied. We stopped them. The distinction hung in the air. Elora swallowed, then asked the question that had been building since the first moment the humans had answered her call. Why? She said. We had nothing to offer you. No treaties. No leverage. You risked everything for a colony the Council had already abandoned. The response came without hesitation. Because you asked, Hale said simply. And because they came for your children. Elora felt something shift inside her then. Something deeper than relief, deeper than gratitude. Understanding, perhaps, or the beginning of it. Above, the Arcbreaker drifted in silent orbit, its presence no longer a threat, but a statement. We will broadcast this, Elora said, her voice firming as she looked out at the empty sky. The Council will see what happened here. They will know who answered when they did not. Good, Hale replied. They should. A brief pause followed, then, Director, the human added, her tone sharpening just enough to carry something more than reassurance. There's one more thing you should understand. Elora's grip tightened on the console. Yes. When we arrive late, Hale said quietly, we save what we can. The meaning settled slowly, deliberately. And when you don't? Elora asked. The answer came without warmth. We make sure it never happens again. The channel closed. Elora stood in the silence that followed, the weight of survival pressing against the edges of something far larger than her colony, far larger than Narith 9. Above her, the Arcbreaker remained, not as a guardian, not as a conqueror, as a warning. And across the galaxy, when the story of Narith 9 spread beyond the frozen moon and into the halls of those who had chosen silence, it would carry a truth none of them could ignore. Humanity did not arrive to negotiate with monsters. They arrived to end them,